Hello and welcome to the Teacher Candidate Work Sample Tutorial. Information included within this portfolio should be specific to one class section of students that you teach throughout a day. So if you are a secondary teacher and you teach multiple sections or hours of a content area, then you will choose one, say hour 3, block 3, and those are the students that you will collect the data on, analyze, and use for your 5 consecutive days of instruction. If you're an elementary teacher and you teach the same students throughout the day, then you will choose one content area, math, science, social studies, and within that content area, you will hone in on collecting data, making a pre and a post assessment, and then 5 days of instruction within this teacher candidate work sample. So as I go through the teacher candidate work sample, I'm not going to read straight from the template on things that need to be inputted within the template, but instead I am going to pinpoint some items that we are looking for you to make sure that you explain as you submit your teacher candidate work sample to show that you are ready to become a classroom teacher in the field. Once you've decided on the class of students that you would like to use for your teacher candidate work sample, you're going to fill out this very first part of the information sheet, which is your name, the district you are currently student teaching in or interning in, the school name, the title of the unit, the content area covered, and the grade level that's going to be within this unit. As you work through the teacher candidate work sample, you're going to want to type in your information. This is not going to be something that you hand write the information throughout. So as you see here, we have the McNeese.edu/steps website where you will find this document in a Word document for you to just enter the information in as you move throughout the teacher candidate work sample and your unit plan. Part 1, the learning environment. The learning environment, you're going to tell us the number of students enrolled in the specific course or period that you are using for the teacher candidate work sample. You're going to tell us the age of the class of students, how many boys, how many girls, and then you're going to put in a check next to whether you perceive the class to be well equipped, adequately equipped, or poorly equipped with supplies. Notice here that it has provide evidence, and so because it's a perception and it's subject to your thinking about the class, you want to put your evidence of why it is that you've chosen the answer that you have. What you believe is an adequately equipped classroom, someone else may believe is a poorly equipped classroom. So you just want to justify your thinking as we ask the students to do when they're doing their work. At the bottom, you want to make sure that you include for us how many times you are interrupted for your teaching. So is this a specific time that they do announcements, or is this a specific time that they do class meetings? Your resource may come in or out in the middle of your lesson. So just give us how many times that you have to stop teaching in order to tend to something else that you don't have control over. The information located within this section will actually be used at another part of the teacher candidate work sample. So whenever you are giving us the information about the students in the top category and the high, average, and low category, we would like you to use assessment in order to prove the information. So you're not going to ask your teacher to just quickly jot down your high, average, and low students, but instead use some kind of assessment data to determine who these children are and where they fall within the spectrum of mastery of content. The top section of individual differences has to do with proven diagnosed students. So if you have a student diagnosed with a issue that has an IEP, then you would note them here. If they actually have a 504 in place, you would note them here. If they are qualified for ESL, you would document them here. And then if they've been tested and shown to be gifted, then you would put your number here. This bottom section specific to here is anything that you have to tell us about the classroom conditions that may have you adjust your instruction. So you don't turn on the AC because it's too loud and the children can't hear you. This class happens to be right after PE, so they come in still wired up. It might be right before lunch, and so they're all dragging and hungry. And so things that you see on this specific group of students that you teach that has to do with the classroom conditions, or other things that have to adjust your instruction in some way. Part two is describing the unit. So here you're going to put the title of your unit, the content areas that you're going to cover. It could be one or two or more, and the length of the unit. And notice right here that it has to be at least 5 days, and the 5 days have to be an entire class period, and also must be consecutive. So if you are starting on a Tuesday, then it has to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday. That's consecutive, 5 consecutive days. It does not have to start Monday through Friday for your unit plan. And also, if you do a A-B schedule, then it would be the 5 A days, even though the days aren't consecutive because you have a B in the middle. It's still the 5 days that you meet with those children consecutively. So make sure that you have at least 5 days. They are consecutive, and it is for a instructional period as designated by your classroom schedule. This part of the unit plan, you are going to tell us about the learning outcomes of your lesson. And so whenever you are writing your 5 days worth of lesson, it is up to your university supervisor and you to determine, are you going to do 5 separate lesson plans, or are you going to do one lesson plan with 5 days worth of learning within it? If you and your university supervisor choose to do the one lesson plan with the 5 days of learning within it, then we ask that you chunk the instruction so that you have day 1, the outcomes, your instructional steps, procedures, informal and formal assessment. Then move to day 2, the outcomes, your procedures, informal and formal assessment. And so throughout the week, you should have each day's information all chunked together so you and or your university supervisor don't have to flip through all of the pages to find the various pieces of information. So once you have written 5 separate lesson plans or one lesson plan with 5 days chunked, you are going to go in and simply copy and paste the outcomes per day. So you will put day 1, you will copy and paste the outcomes underneath it. You will put day 2, copy and paste the outcomes and put them underneath it. So you have 5 days of learning, 5 days of outcome. Then you are going to put your final assessment outcomes. So there's going to be 6 sections of outcomes, 5 days worth of learning, and then your 6th one is, what does your final assessment say? So notice in here that you are looking at objectives, and you should have 2 to 4 objectives per day, or an outcome and objective is the same thing interchangeably. So you're going to look for an outcome or an objective. You should have 2 to 4. They should have some lower and some upper. And notice that when you are making your pre and post assessment, that they need, this says 2, but it is supposed to be 1, at least 1 higher order level learning outcome. And so if you're using depth of knowledge, DOK, then that would be a 3 or a 4. Higher level thinking, that must be included in that final assessment. You've taught the kids for 5 days. They should be able to think deeper about the content that they are learning. Now that you've told us about your outcomes, you're going to move to number 5, and you're going to give us the rationale for the learning outcomes. So why are those learning outcomes that you've chosen, why are they important, and how are they related to the Louisiana student standards? You are earning a teaching certificate for the state of Louisiana, and so with that, you need to be well versed in Louisiana student standards that the kids should master at the end of any given school year. And so you're going to explain what your outcomes are, how they're tied to the Louisiana student standards. Number 6 asks, what kind of adjustments will you have to make with your outcomes or your activities or the materials that you're going to be using for differentiation within your instruction? And so this is where I noted for you earlier, the individual differences section of the teacher candidate work sample will be used. So if you tell us that you have 5 gifted students, then in this section, 6 adjustments made, then you would say Day 3, the activity for the 5 gifted students will be changed to include what? And so you are going to let us know that you realize that when you're a teacher, you can't go out and teach one way and expect all of your children to understand and master the content. That you have to change your instruction or the outcomes for some students if they're a SPED child, or accommodate other learning levels throughout your instructional 5 days, as well as any assessments that you may do. So right here, you are taking individual differences and you're explaining how you're going to differentiate your instruction by instruction and student and be specific. Okay, so you're not going to just say like one day I'm going to give them student choice and that's going to be enough differentiation that you will reach every child in your classroom. So you want to make sure that you're specific and you're thorough and that you have differentiation throughout the week, not just one moment of one lesson of your 5 days. Any adjustments that you need to make might have to do with the availability of technology, or they might have a lot of technology, but it's not all working. The number of texts you may have. You might have to break up your teaching because lunch falls in the middle of it. So these are adjustments that you're making because of classroom conditions. Utilization of technology or other products of technology in this unit. So this has to do with teacher and student. So make sure that you are describing how you're going to incorporate technology above and beyond the teacher using a PowerPoint. And so what are you as the teacher, what technology are you going to use as a teacher to help bridge the gap of learning? And what technology are you going to require the students to use throughout your 5 days of your lesson in order to learn and or assess their learning of the content? So this is teacher and student and has to go beyond you only using a PowerPoint or ClassFlow to actually get through the lesson. The next bit of information is just things that you need to know about your assessment plan. And so when we get into the assessment plan, we're talking specifically the data that you're going to use. So as I said in the beginning, you're going to choose a content and or a group of students, and that is what you are going to hone in on for this teacher candidate work sample. Once you've chosen your content and your group of students, you are going to create a pre-assessment. And within this pre-assessment, you should have no more than 2 outcomes. And one of them at least needs to reflect higher order thinking. Your pre-assessment must have at least 10 questions aligned to the rigor of the standard. And whatever you do for the pre-assessment formatting should be the exact same for the post-assessment formatting. So if you decided to, I don't recommend, but if you decided to do 10 multiple choice questions for your pre-assessment, then your post-assessment should also have 10 multiple choice questions. However, they should not be the exact same questions. So if you are covering double-digit addition and you have 10 double-digit addition questions for their pre-assessment, then their post-assessment will be also 10 double-digit math problems, but not the same 10. So you'll have different digits in there with different answers, but they'll cover the same content. So if the first one does not have regrouping, then your your post-test cannot have regrouping. So the format and the content are aligned, but not the exact questions. Your pretest, once you determine your class, your students, your pretest must be given at least 1 week in advance of your unit being taught. This is for you to have time to analyze the data and determine if the students are ready for your 5 days of learning, or if they've already mastered the content and you need to choose something else. You also can determine if there is alignment with the rigor of the standards or alignment with the rigor of the assessment itself when you give a pretest in advance. So you're going to give a pretest, you're going to write 5-day unit plan, teach the 5-day unit plan, and at the end of the 5th day, you will do a post assessment. After you do the post-assessment, you're going to analyze the data, which I will show you how to do in just a moment. After you analyze the data, then you are going to do a response to intervention, some small group instruction with the students the following week. So you have a pre-test, you have a week of teaching, you have a follow-up week of response to intervention, and then you are going to complete this teacher candidate work sample. When you're looking at the time frame to complete all of this information, it will take you about 3 or 4 weeks. I would say 4, so you need to plan ahead. So about 4 weeks to complete this entire process from pre-test to submission of your teacher candidate work sample. When you are creating your pre-test, you also want to identify what is mastery of the content. So if you have an essay for a secondary English class, then you want to tell us on the rubric, what do they need to score to make mastery? So if they score a rubric out of 4 rows of descriptors, then a 3 might be benchmark. If you are doing a 10-question test, then you might consider a 70 at benchmark or an 80 at benchmark. So you have to tell us what you perceive as mastery of the content so that we, as readers of your also from your 5 days of lesson plans, you're going to tell us how you are going to informally and formally assess the students as you move through the week. This will be a copy and paste from your lesson plan. You will put day 1. You will tell us the standard that's going to be covered, and then you will explain the informal and formal way you are assessing that day 1 learning of that standard. It's important that you are using this informal and formal assessments to not only move through the instruction of any given day, but also the next day. So day 2, you may not be ready to move on because your formal assessment tells you that not all the kids got it or that there's holes in their thinking specifically. And so that you might have to readdress something you taught on day 1 before you can move to day 2. So make sure that you are using this information to guide your instruction each day. You don't want to spend an entire day on something that they didn't perceive to get correct, and you should be able to prove that they are mastering this content with your informal and formal assessments. So it's something that you have put in place and that you're using to drive instruction throughout one given lesson plan in a day informally and throughout lesson plans over continuous day formal instruction. Assessment, I'm sorry. Now that you've created your pre-assessment, you're going to describe the pre-assessment methods to us. What you see here in italicized are directions and points that you need to hit. So I'm going to not read through this. You can read it yourself. But what I am going to do is talk some more about what you should be using it for. So make sure that you are analyzing your data, which I'm going to show you how to do in just a moment, and that you are determining and describing how the data proves the need for certain grouping. So you've given your pre-assessment, and it's important to note the types of questions that the students are missing so that you can put them in groups. It's also important to determine what kind of differentiated methods that you could use during your instruction. And you are going to include the pre-assessment itself as well as a copy of each of the children's pre-assessment as well. And you can make sure you mark out their name and just put student 1, 2, or whatever you want to use as far as that's concerned. Make sure again that you're using this information to drive your instructions, and you should make changes to your overall plan using this pre-assessment data. So within your 5-day lesson plans, you need to make sure that you are using this data to change up what you thought was going to be fabulous. You now understand needs to be removed or changed or revamped in order to meet the needs of all of your children. Again, your pre-assessment must be given 1 week before you're scheduled to teach your unit plan. So now you've given your pre-assessment, you've taught 5 days, and this is day 5, and now you're going to give your post-assessment. So again, you're going to make sure that you read through each of these bullets and that you describe each of the ideas that we are asking you to look at. As well, you need to make sure that your post-assessment is a repeat of your pre-assessment with the same format, same rigor, same types of questions, but with different answers. Again, you're going to give us a copy of your post-test and copy of the artifacts from your students with their names scratched out with student 1, 2, or 3 to identify the different papers. Again, this is going to be given on day 5. As you've learned within your coursework, alignment of standards, outcomes, instructions, and assessment are vital to ensure that you are teaching what you're supposed to be teaching at the rigor it's supposed to be, and that your assessment data actually shows mastery of the student learning within that content and standard. So here for number 4, you are going to tell us about the alignment of your lesson. And notice that it says that you are going to explain and provide evidence using terminology. So you can't just say something like, 100% of my students mastered the post-assessment, so I know that they learned the content. That does not show they learned the content because the assessment might not be aligned with the rigor of the standard. The instruction that you did might not be aligned with the content that you were supposed to have covered. The outcome might not align with the assessment, and therefore they did not learn what they were supposed to learn within the lesson. So this is you proving to us that you understand that from the standard to the outcome to the instruction to the assessment, that it is all aligned with content and rigor of learning. And so this is your moment to shine, to tell us that you understand the overall idea of planning and student learning with terminology and evidence. So before we get into looking at your data, we need you to put a couple of things. And so you've had a pre and a post assessment, and within your pre and post assessment, you've either had 1 or 2 outcomes. Here we just need you to tell us what they are. So for outcome number 1, whatever it is, this is outcome number 1. What is the standard that goes with outcome number 1? And so you're going to write your outcome, and then you're going to tell us the standard number and description. This just gives your scorer, your evaluator, an opportunity to look at what you think you are trying to measure with your pre and post assessment. So what is the outcome as written in your lesson plan? And what is the standard number and description that goes along with that information? Again, reminders, your pre and post assessment student work must be included. You're going to identify your pre and post assessment outcomes, and it can be no more than 2, and at least one of them has to be a higher order thinking. And once you've completed your analysis of data, which I'll show you in just a moment, you are actually going to upload that information into this website on the STEPS into this link on the STEPS website. So you're going to make sure that you have the information correct, of course, before you go into the website to put the information in, so that you have it ready and it'll be quicker on inputting.